Hey everyone, so this is going to be chapter 6, the snake charm in our book Singers on the Sand. Alright, so if you haven't read or listened to chapters 4 and 5, then I suggest you go and do that before you listen to this one. They are uploaded onto YouTube. Alright, here goes. Tamar stood in the door of his hut, and his eyes followed Satu as the boy raced across the few roads between the two houses. The words Satu had just spoken stood up in his mind like black stumps in a burned-over clearing. He will not leave. He will not leave. Tamar shook his head. The thing that shocked him was Satu's fierce determination, and he wondered whether all the village people who had listened to the big teacher's magic were so strong for the new teaching. For the first time he wondered whether it had all been a wise thing to send for the new teachers of Islam. Up to this moment failure had not entered his mind. Now he was not sure. If the big teacher chose to stay... Sorry about that. If the big teachers chose to stay, and if a number of the village people wanted him to stay, and if they were all as stubborn as the chief's son, then there would surely be trouble. Well, it was too late now. The messengers with Chief Meriden had already gone to the south to invite the Islam teachers. Tamar felt certain they would come. He took the monkey out and laid it in his hands. He could see that the little animal felt better. He took a braided thong from the wall, fastened it to a wide bark belt around the monkey's middle, and then tethered him just outside the door. Tamar made a fire in the clean clay stove, and as he worked he kept seeing a pair of little white hands brushing and clearing the ashes from among the stones. He tried to shut thoughts of the little girl from his mind, because he needed to make plans. Now that he put the heavy curses on his charms, he must think of some plan to get them in the big teacher's way, so that he would touch one of them. Also, while the chief was away, he must prepare the people to receive the Islam teachers. He must find some way to prevent the villagers from flocking to the house on the sand, and he must do something to win Satu away from his fanatical devotion of the teacher's family and the new magic they had brought. With his mind still wandering, Tamar prepared the cassava for his evening meal, and he took it to the spring. As he washed the roots, he thought of the little girl with the yellow braids and the pink dress who had scoured the kettle that morning. He tried to push thoughts of the child from his mind, but the first thing he saw when he climbed the ladder to his hut was the coconut shell in the window with the freshened sprigs of flowering twigs. Tamar shook with sudden anger. Was this some kind of witchcraft? He set the kettle over the stove, rushed to the window, and flung both the shell and blossoms out towards the jungle. Then he kindled his fire. While he waited for the kettle to boil, he unwrapped his charms. He handled them with care, for the curses he had laid on the principal charms were so powerful that he feared them himself. He laid the goat's skull, the shark's tooth, and the dried snake by themselves on a piece of bark cloth, and put the others away. Before he sat down to eat, he looked out over the fire mountain. The ground had quivered several times during the day. Smoke and flame belched from the volcano's mouth almost all the time, and the rumblings under the ground sounded worse than usual. He dished up his meal and sat down to eat. As he ate, he planned what he would do. First, he intended to scare the village people about the fire spirits. They feared the mountain, and certainly he could make them see that it was because of the new teacher that the volcano spit smoke and flame. The fire spirits must be furious. He didn't think he would have much trouble convincing them of that. Then he would let them know that he would use his most deadly charms against the teacher. When the bad things began to happen, he would soon have the village people back under his control again. It was evening when Tamar finished his food. He had been home almost a day already, and not one person had come to call him. The chief had come on the first night, and Satu came this afternoon, but they had not come for medicine. Then, of course, the little girl came, but what could have happened to the village people? Usually some sick or troubled person called him several times a day. After he'd been away for so long, there must be sick persons and worried ones that needed his help. Tamar remembered the last time he'd come back from a journey to the other side of the island. There had been people waiting outside his hut from the moment they knew he was home. The witch doctor looked out his door again. He saw village men and women walking down toward the teacher's house. Anger shook him again. This, then, was the reason no one came for medicine or to call him to help the sick or to tell him their troubles and ask for advice. Just look at them. There must be at least 10 people going down the path right now. That big teacher had stolen their hearts. They had taken their evening baths at the spring, eaten their evening meal. They ought to be inside the houses getting ready to sleep. Instead, here they were, flocking down the path to the teacher's house. Tamar remembered his visit to the teacher's house the night before, just a little later than this. He remembered the singing and how it had struck him down with its beauty and power, and how he had lain shocked and confused in the salt grass outside the low rock wall. The village people must be going over to hear that singing. He supposed he went there every night to listen to it. There was probably no way to stop them tonight. It might be a good thing to follow them and see what would happen in the big teacher's house. As he swung down the ladder and along the path, the witch man saw more people come out of their houses. They hurried toward the teacher's house, as though they were afraid they might miss something. He overtook one of the young men from the village with the babe in his arms. "Where do you go?" Tamar asked. "Oh, don't you know? We go every night to hear the singing and the magic from the black box." Tamar didn't say anything. The young man turned and looked at him. "Oh, you don't need to worry about his magic. It is all good. This baby of mine was sick yesterday, and the big teacher came back and gave him medicine. He said the magic words to his God, and he sat with us until the child was better. Now you see, the baby is well again." Tamar knew for certain why the village people had not come to ask for his help. Anger rose again in his stomach, but he put it down and questioned the young man about the teacher and his family, until they stood before the gate and into the teacher's garden. Tamar had not meant to go inside the house, but he could not avoid going in. The villagers swept him along with them, but he was a little curious too. In the front room of the house, clean mats were spread, and the room was almost filled with eager people. The teacher sat in the corner of the room. Tamar stared at him. Even as he sat there on a mat, cross-legged, Tamar could see that he was the biggest man who had ever lived on this island. The hair of his head and beard were red and curly. The red-haired giant, that's what it was. The big man laughed and talked to the village people as they came in. He called them by name. He called the children by name. He held a block of magic in his hands. Tamar's anger came back. The mats were crowded with people. No one moved over to make room for him. He decided to go home. Then he felt a small hand tug at his. He looked down into the face of the little girl who had visited his hut this morning. She smiled up at him and whispered something in her own language. She pulled on his hand. Tamar allowed her to lead him into another room of the house. He understood that this little one was proud of her new house, that she knew he had never been inside before and wanted to show it to him. The witchman saw that everything in the house was as neat as the garden outside. The teacher's wife had arranged the 4 rooms of the house so that one was used for cooking and eating, 2 for sleeping, and the largest one for visitors. Tamar looked at the high platform these people used for sleeping. Each one was covered with something that should have been a mat, but wasn't. These covers were made of so many bright colours that they bewildered Tamar's eyes. He laid his hands on one of the platforms. The cover felt soft, and he stroked it. The child led him into the big room and found him a comfortable sitting place where he could lean back against the wall. Then she sat down beside him. She had not let go of his hand. Tamar fumbled around for his anger, but it was gone. The child's hand was still warm in his. Clearly, she had chosen him for a friend. The witch doctor was not accustomed to the feel of a child's hand. There was something reassuring about it. The teacher spoke now in the language of the island. True, his speech stumbled and halted and was filled with mistakes, but the man's voice was friendly, and the meaning of what he said was clear. Tamar could see that the big teacher loved the people who sat here before him, and in spite of his imperfect talk, he was able to make them understand the kindness he offered them. When the man opened the block of magic and began speaking to it, his deep, rich voice took on a solemn tone that awed the people. The room quietened. Even the children hushed their giggles and their whimpering. The magic pressed Tamar with his power, but he resisted it. He looked down at the little girl beside him. She had laid her head on his knee, and one of her little braids fell across his hand. The silky hair lay soft and warm against it. The little one is sleepy, Tamar thought. He smiled in spite of himself. Then the teacher closed the magic box and began to sing. The small girl sprang up, pulled her hand away from Tamar's, and went to stand beside her father. As the rich melody flowed through the room, she sang along with her father, every note as perfect as his, but in a higher tone. The teacher's wife sang well too, and so did the boy. Some of the village people tried to make the beautiful sounds, but they had not learned very well yet. Tamar saw several of them look at him, as though they felt embarrassed or timid in his presence. Again Tamar felt the power of the singing, as he had felt the night before. Tamar's fear overwhelmed him. He leapt to his feet and rushed out into the dark. He ran all the way up to the village. All out of breath, the witch-man scrambled up the little ladder of his hut. Then he flung himself down in the doorway and gazed into the night. He could still hear the singing and the teachers in the teacher's house. It came faintly through the air even from this distance, and shook him with fear. He glanced at the glowing cone of the fire mountain in the curve of the bay. Even as Tamar sat there recovering his breath, the earth quivered. Yes, the fire spirits were very angry. They had good reason to be angry. Then the song ended. Tamar relaxed. "Are you there, Tamar?" A voice spoke out of the darkness. "I see you do not drink the new magic and the music." Tamar peered into the night and made out the form of old Gola, the chief's eldest adviser and counselor. "We are the only ones in the village who do not run after the new magic?" Tamar asked. "I think the others are all there." The old man hobbled up the ladder and into the room. "I think most of them go out only of curiosity. They'll run after a new thing, you know that. It is not good, Gola. It is dangerous. Look at the fire mountain. Do you think the fire spirits are happy about this new teaching that had come to the great Sangar? No, of course not. But we must be patient. The chief will certainly bring the Islam teachers. They will also be new. They will have magic too, and they will have wonderful things to do and say. They will make their kind of witchcraft, and the people will run after that too. Do you think so?" Tamar pulled a mat up to the door, and they both sat down close together. "You see, Gola, some of these people have already been taken in the heart. That is bad." "Yes, it is too bad about the chief's son. How can he ever be chief if he follows this strange magic? What will his father do? He had no other son. Chief Meriden should have called you back sooner." "Satu has made his heart strong for the new teacher," Tamar said, "but we must think of some way to break the power of the magic over him. Ordinary advice will not move him. Perhaps it is not yet too late." Gola's voice sounded courageous. "You have powerful charms, you know." "Yes," Tamar's voice vibrated with excitement. "I already have laid the curse. Tomorrow I will call the spirits again and plant the devil magic." "Good, good," Gola chuckled and stood up to leave. Long after the old man was gone, Tamar laid on his sleeping mat, and his thoughts tumbled through his mind. Of course he had the charms. Either the teacher's family would be sick and perhaps die, or they might be a bad accident. Something terrible thing was sure to happen. His charms always worked on the island people. There could be no reason why they wouldn't work on these foreign teachers. Then another thought pushed into his mind. The picture of the little girl with the yellow braids came up. He saw her stricken with fever or shaken with chills, thin with the starvation sickness. All these he was able to bring on to the teacher's family. These thoughts made him squirm and twist on his mat. He had a dreadful fear, and a dreadful fear struck him. Had the teacher's magic already taken hold of him? Tamar did not sleep that night. When he heard the monkey cry, he got up and turned the little creature loose and watched while it swung up into the trees in the edge of the jungle. Morning climbed the sky over the fire mountain, and Tamar was ashamed and angry. With a vicious swing, he picked up the black kettle and went down to the spring to prepare his breakfast. The spring was behind the house and a short distance into the jungle, but the path was well-beaten trail, for most of the village men used that spring for bathing. Tamar lingered a long time at the spring. He bathed, he shook himself, then he drew in deep breaths of the cool, moist air. At last he felt better. He knew he could face what he must do this day. He filled the black kettle with enough water to cook the taro, and he washed and went back to his hut. The door stood open as he had left it. His 3 most powerful charms still lay on the floor where he had put them yesterday, but now the little girl with yellow braids and a pink dress sat beside them. A scream of horror choked in Tamar's throat as she picked up the dried snake and stroked it gently while she crooned soft words as though she pitied the poor dead animal. Tamar dropped the kettle of water, and with a great splash it clattered on the ladder and thumped to the ground. Ooh, and that is the end of the chapter. So if I go back here we can see the picture that goes with this chapter, and that is the little girl holding the snake. I hope that we discover that God is powerful enough to not let the little girl be cursed by the snake. I'm very sure that's what's going to happen in the next chapter. Anyway, I will read that to you next weekend. Happy Sabbath, guys. Stay well.